Can I handle this alone? Really, truly alone? As a full-time parent with no backup, no help? For years, that was a question that kept me on the emotional roller coaster. Before I left my ex-husband, life was exhausting. His mood swings were all over the place. He'd be laughing one minute and crying the next. And after I left the marriage, the manipulation continued, but from a bit further away, through the phone. In this video, I'm going to share information about how I started to set boundaries with my ex-husband during the early years after I left the marriage. If you're navigating through an emotionally manipulative marriage or relationship, I'm going to give you information about how to start setting boundaries so that you can reclaim the peace in your life. Hi, I'm Kristen. Years ago, I left a toxic marriage, and it took me getting out of that marriage to realize that I was repeating the cycles of emotional abuse and neglect from my childhood in that marriage. And that marriage left me with anxiety, depression, PTSD, codependence, and an anxious attachment style. Now I've largely healed from these traumas, and I want to share what I've learned with you so that you can heal too. I'm combining my personal experience with my professional experience, 30 years as a registered nurse and nurse educator, to share everything that I've learned with you. My ex-husband's most common tactic when he was manipulating me after we had separated from the marriage was that he would refuse to participate in parenting the kids. If it was his weekend was coming up, he would, bring up a conflict and basically start to refuse to do his part. And it was very effective because it ended up making me tolerate the manipulation and abuse that he was giving to me. After a while, a new question started to surface, and that was the question of what happens if I don't do this alone? What happens if I don't end this cycle? And I started to wonder, if the abuse that he was giving to me was also starting to negatively impact my kids. If you're here, I'm assuming it's because you might be in a similar situation, either trying to navigate through a manipulative relationship or trying to co-parent with someone who's abusive. And this is episode 1 in a series where I'm going to break down the steps that I took to break free from being on this emotional roller coaster. Before I dive in, I want to share with you on the screen the number for the domestic abuse hotline and text line. And I just want to say it's important to know what your risks are. And when I separated from my husband, I did end up going to the courts, and I took out an order for protection and a restraining order against him because of some of his behaviors. And so I want to just let you know. And I did that because I had contacted a domestic abuse shelter to get information and advice. And I highly recommend that if you are in a situation and you're unsure of your safety, to take that into consideration. Trust your gut, know what's safe for you, and get help when you need it. So let's talk a little bit more about what that emotional roller coaster was like. And I really literally thought about it as a roller coaster because I would be gripping on tight, dealing with these emotional mood swings, kind of not knowing when it was coming, not knowing when he was going to be in a good mood, not knowing when he wasn't going to be in a bad mood, not knowing when I was going to get a text that was, going to be full of all kinds of mean accusations. And this was physically exhausting. I felt like I had this kind of low-grade, constant buzzing and electrical signal going through my body of complete exhaustion combined with fear. If any of this sounds familiar, it would be great if you would click the like button. That will really help ensure that more people get to see this video. Thanks. It was truly this exhaustion, this just constant up and down, and this physical exhaustion. That was the thing that made me realize that I had to make a significant change. For so many of us, after we leave a relationship like this, the main place that we get manipulated is through our phone. And for me, my phone turned from being, a tool for connecting with people to a portal of chaos, a stressful portal. And this was really the place that my ex-husband used to manipulate me and try to get to permeate into my psyche and to tear down my resilience and my strength. The type of abuse that my husband would give to me was lots of criticism, lots of belittling. I took a lot of that through my marriage, but also it persisted after we split up through the phone. And maybe you know this feeling too, but I knew when he would belittle me or say things to me that intellectually I knew that they weren't true. But it was always surprising to me that even though I knew that it wasn't true, there was always a certain amount of information that he would throw at me that would permeate my psyche and make me feel bad about myself. I believed to some degree in the truth of the things that he was saying, and I believed in it emotionally. When you're in a situation like this, in an abusive relationship, you get used to it. You get used to the manipulation. You get used to the exhaustion. And there's a risk that comes with that because you get so used to it, you don't even realize the profound impact that it's having on you. And then later for me, after I left my ex-husband, I started to realize that I wasn't the only one paying the price. And that was also when I really started to make a decision that I needed to break this cycle. I started noticing patterns when my older daughter got to be about 12 or 13. On the weekends that she was supposed to stay with my ex-husband, she would start scheduling sleepovers with her friends and would end up spending the whole weekend at her friend's house rather than going with my ex-husband. And my younger daughter at that time, who was 9 or 10, she would spend the whole weekend with my ex-husband. And that started to happen repeatedly over time. I started to see how hard it was for both of my daughters to spend weekends with him. It was becoming very stressful for both of them to the point where, as I said, my oldest daughter was completely avoiding it. Honestly, this was a really difficult thing for me to see, I think, and accept because after I left my ex-husband, these weekends that he would have the kids was the only time that I wasn't a single parent. And I kind of held on to that little sliver of freedom that I would get. And I really feel like retrospectively that it clouded my judgment. It made it more difficult and it took longer for me to start to see the negative patterns that were negatively impacting my kids. I started having conversations with my kids too about how their weekends were going and got more information from them and more feedback and really started to realize that they didn't want to spend time with him. And so I made a decision, and I'm not necessarily recommending this decision because it comes with legal risks, but I made a decision to not make my kids go spend weekends with him anymore. Like I said, they were 10 and 13 at the time. We did both have joint legal custody, and I just decided that they didn't need to go to be with him anymore. And that did come with the risk. That came with the risk of him possibly taking me to court and fighting for custody. Fortunately, he didn't. So it worked out okay. And so I just want to be clear that I'm not necessarily advising this. I'm just telling you about my story and what choice I made. I don't know if any of you out there that are watching this have a similar story to share. It would be great if you would share it in the comments. That really helps us all build strength to hear, the different things that all of us are going through. So if you feel comfortable sharing a story, please leave a comment below. There's so much that we need to do to heal from toxic relationships like this. And I wanted to let you know that I've created a mental health resource guide that contains information about all the things that I've done over the past several years to heal from my trauma. And I want to share those things with you. So if you click the link below, I will send it to you for free. Drawing a big line in the sand like I did with my ex-husband and saying that you can't, take the kids anymore on weekends, it's big. I know that that's a really big move to make, and it's not even a move that might be available to some of you. And I also wanted to say that I wouldn't have been able to make that decision if it wasn't for a lot of the smaller moves that I had taken before that. And the first thing that I did to really start to separate from my husband was taking control over my phone. The first thing that I did was to choose whether or not to respond. In a lot of cases, he was lambasting me with information that didn't actually require a response. And so rather than fighting back, I would choose not to respond. I also often would just wait. Sometimes if I had a strong emotional reaction, a fearful reaction to his texts, I would wait until I felt calm and relaxed to answer it. And sometimes that was often not until the next day. I chose not to block my husband with my phone because for me, I felt a certain level of safety in knowing what he was up to and knowing what his moods were, having some idea what was going on in his life because his behavior was unpredictable enough that I didn't want to have no idea of what he was doing, where he was, where his mind was at. In the next episode of this series, I'm going to talk more about some actual tools that you can use to communicate and protect yourself from this sort of manipulation. These tools will help you protect your energy and will help starve the abuse and the drama from the attention that it needs to survive. If you're here, I'm assuming it's because you probably are in an abusive relationship or have left an abusive relationship. And I bet you likely need help rewiring some thought patterns that you have in your head as a result of the abuse. And I just finished a series about that, and I'm linking it up above here, so you should go check that out.